Welcome everybody to another episode of Trojan Conquest Live, the USC show here at the Voice of College Football. And hey, Mark Rogers, he had his college football playoff reaction show earlier on Tuesday, and he has his full boat of shows. And as you know, this show normally airs on Monday nights, but I was covering USC basketball, which I have to do for Trojans Wire. USC basketball playing Kansas State on Monday, so I was not available. We thought about rescheduling for Tuesday, and Mark, carrying his full load, carrying his full boat of shows, he needed to rest. He needs rest. He needs to gargle some honey lemon ginger tea, I'm sure, as well, to rest those pipes. So, totally understand Mark. He does more than anyone could ever imagine here at the Voice of College Football. Now, Tim Prangley might be joining me momentarily, but if not, I'm ready to talk because there's a lot to talk about at USC football. Alex Grinch getting fired, obviously the big story. So a lot of layers to the onion that we can peel away as we delve into this story, and then what's next for USC football. We'll start one place and we can go then in a lot of different directions. Again, unpacking the various dimensions of this story. Let's start with just the simple point that, I have been telling you that this was going to happen. All right. And some people were, I have to see it to believe it. I'm not going to trust that it's going to happen until it actually does. But this was going to happen. The situation at USC simply became so untenable. There was no escape route. There was no alternative decision. There was no real choice. And so I want to be very clear about this. Lincoln Riley is not some brave, courageous man, so a leader of men in this elevated professional as a result of firing Alex Grinch now. He doesn't get a lot of credit because we all know at USC, at least from a USC fans' perspective, he should have done this in January. He should have done this right after the Cotton Bowl. He should have gone out and made a run at Jim Leonard. He did not. That's when he really should have acted. We all know this. We said it. We talked about it at the time. So Lincoln Riley doesn't get a lot of credit for firing Grinch now. But that said, there's a counterbalance to this. And a lot of people have been saying, understandably, Lincoln Riley's never going to win a national title. Lincoln Riley's never going to get to that next level, that higher level, because he's married to Alex Grinch. He's never going to let him go. And that whole idea that Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch were in a long-term marriage until death do they part, that was just never realistic. Situations can and do fall off the rails. Situations become so politically, and this wasn't toxic, but so politically unproductive for the school and for Lincoln Riley that there was no chance that this would continue, right? It is worth noting, a USC recruit, now 2026, not 2024, but nevertheless, a USC recruit committed to the Trojans minutes after Alex Grinch was fired on Sunday afternoon. That doesn't happen by accident. And it was a business decision by Lincoln Riley, a tardy one, but nevertheless, there was no choice at the end, right? And so this idea that, Lincoln is going to stay with Alex Grinch until, the end of time, just that was never a realistic view. He had to make this choice. One could say, again, it wasn't really a choice at all. He had to minimize the hemorrhaging on the recruiting trail. USC can't continue to lose top-end defensive prospects, particularly those in Southern California, at St. John Bosco, at Mater Dei, to the Notre Dames, to the Ohio States, the Bamas, the Georgias, the Michigans. Couldn't continue to hemorrhage on the trail or also in the transfer portal. And let's keep in mind, the transfer portal window opens on December 4. Lincoln Riley needed to make this decision now so that for any players intending to transfer, lining up their options for 2024, that USC was very front and center in terms of communicating to potential portal prospects. Alex Grinch is not going to be our defensive coordinator. We're going to get a much better defensive coordinator. USC's in a position to hire one at the end of November. Let's remember, USC season Regular season ends November 18. USC's not going to be playing in that Pac-12 title game on Friday, December 1st in Las Vegas. So the November 18 is the last game. And now having that Thanksgiving weekend off, it gives Lincoln Riley and USC Athletic Director Jen Cohen extra time to search for that candidate, to interview agents, to line everything up, to get in front of the line for the best defensive coordinator prospects on the market. So by having that extra week, USC can secure a top defensive coordinator in late November. And by doing that, before the transfer portal opens up on December 4, USC can send that message to people in the portal, to defensive players, particularly in the portal. Okay, we're serious about defense now. We're going to get better on defense now. We have this proven defensive coordinator who's going to coach you up right. It's going to give you quality coaching. We're not doing amateur hour anymore. We're not doing the clown car with Alex Grinch. We have an actual defensive coordinator on board. So there wasn't a choice for Lincoln Riley. I mean, you can say that he could have held on for 2 weeks, which 2 weeks in the larger scheme of things probably wouldn't have been hugely destructive in any unique or particular way. But just having the lingering reality that Alex Grinch is still employed, Alex Grinch is still on the job, and having Alex Grinch field questions heading into the Oregon game, and having Alex Grinch field questions heading into the UCLA game. Yeah, it was probably a distraction. It was going to take away from the preparation. It certainly wasn't going to improve morale in the room. And at least with 2 weeks left in the season, you get to see what Sean Nua, defensive line coach, and Brian Odom, linebacker coach, you get to see what they can do in terms of working together to formulate a game plan. And maybe this creates some opportunities for them. It creates areas for growth. And maybe the incoming defensive coordinator, he probably wouldn't retain both, but I would say Sean Nua, in terms of what he's done with this defensive line, maybe the incoming defensive coordinator, based on these next 2 weeks, might look at what Sean Nua does and say, hey, you know what? I'm comfortable with retaining him as defensive line coach under my new approach, my new philosophy as an incoming defensive coordinator. So Nua and Odom definitely are coaching for not necessarily their jobs, but certainly like their position in the industry. Like they are auditioning for the new defensive coordinator. That's a very real thing. So you give Nua and Odom that chance to build their own portfolio, because they get to test out a new skill set. It's only 2 weeks, small sample size, so we shouldn't assign too much meaning to what happens against Oregon and UCLA. But nevertheless, like they get their hands on the steering wheel a little bit. And that can be a growth engine for their careers and how they interview for future jobs they might have down the line. So, this made sense from a lot of angles. It was time to do it. One could have argued that USC easily could have done this after the Utah game when a pig farmer roasted them for 34 points. And, Oregon, the team that USC plays this coming Saturday, Oregon held that pig farmer, Bryson Barnes, to just 6 points. And that just made USC look that much worse when Oregon beat Utah a couple of weeks ago, 35-6 in Salt Lake City. So, it was just an accumulation of everything, not just the huge point totals that USC was giving up, not just the fact that Washington got a couple 100 yards before contact, without even someone breathing on a Washington running back. Not just the fact that this was a total video game, not just the fact that, Caleb Williams played a great game. USC's offense was terrific, scored 42 points, and yet lost by 10. And you have the powerful, viral, visual image of Caleb Williams sobbing with his family, and like Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley ruined Caleb Williams' 2023 season. They ruined the final chapter of Caleb Williams' career at USC. That was a very public humiliation for the program, for Lincoln Riley. There was no choice here. There was really no choice for Lincoln Riley. So the idea that he was going to ride with Alex Grinch to the end of time just never made sense. And I hope we can now see that in retrospect. And so USC has finally turned the page, and we get to have this defensive coordinator search. Now, let's talk about that defensive coordinator search. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that when any job applicant interviews for a job, you're going to ask questions about your workplace and your work environment and your working conditions. What am I getting into here? Am I going to have a work situation that I can be reasonably comfortable with? And so this new defensive coordinator is not just working for Lincoln Riley directly, but also, what's going to be the larger environment, the procedure, the method within the USC program. And so any smart defensive coordinator is going to ask Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen, say, how do you do things around here in terms of strength and conditioning? Am I going to have a defense whose players are developed in a way that I think is appropriate for what I like to do, for what I want to achieve? And that defensive coordinator candidate, when Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen get around to interviewing him, he's going to ask about Benny Wiley. He's going to ask about, what are his methods? What's his philosophy? How do they integrate into the larger program, into the larger way in terms of how you practice, how you prepare, how you plan? And if that defensive coordinator candidate is a high-end candidate, the best of the best, and the answers that Lincoln Riley provides about Benny Wiley are not satisfactory, well, that defensive coordinator candidate is going to say no. And so this brings up the point that, Lincoln Riley, all right, he had to fire Alex Grinch, but now we really begin to learn more about Lincoln Riley. Like firing Alex Grinch, that was the easy part. It really was, because again, it really wasn't a choice, right? There was just no possible alternative left. There was no choice. But now Lincoln Riley, with interviewing for an elite defensive coordinator, he has to look deep inside himself and how he goes about his business. And Lincoln Riley needs to admit, my methods, my approach, my larger overall philosophy haven't been working. And that partly means that Benny Wiley, the strength coach that I brought aboard at Oklahoma when there was already a very established and successful strength coach named Jerry Schmidt, who guided Riley's first team at Oklahoma, first as head coach in 2017. Riley was offensive coordinator in 2015 and 16 under Bob Stoops. But when Riley was given the keys to the program by Stoops and he coached OU in 2017, Jerry Schmidt was the strength coach. And that was Riley's best Oklahoma team. And it's not an idle coincidence. Like, those two things are connected, that you had an elite strength coach who was providing toughness, who was cultivating tough players. Oklahoma came within an eyelash of making the national championship game that season, almost beating Georgia in that classic 2018 Rose Bowl. That was with Jerry Schmidt as the strength coach. When Lincoln Riley brought in Benny Wiley, he had a successful thing with Jerry Schmidt, but he wanted his guy, Benny Wiley, in 2018. It's not as though Oklahoma was bad in 2018 and 2019 and made the college football playoff those 2 years, but the standard was not quite as high as what Jerry Schmidt established in 2017. And Riley has still not had a team as good as that 2017 Oklahoma team, which had Jerry Schmidt as its strength and conditioning coach. And ever since then, Riley's results have not fallen off a cliff. They were still really, really good. But this year you had a real dip. Because you have Benny Wiley at USC. Those players didn't have the benefit of being coached by Jerry Schmidt. The 2018 and 2019 Oklahoma teams, Wiley was the strength coach, but those players had the foundation of being coached by Schmidt in 2017. So that was still an influence for those players. And so it's not as though those 2018 and 2019 Oklahoma players were fully and solely cultivated by Benny Wiley. They had the foundation of Jerry Schmidt, and Benny Wiley basically inherited those players who had been developed by Jerry Schmidt. So at USC, there was no previous Jerry Schmidt influence in strength and conditioning. And another thing that you've had at USC, or that you haven't had at USC that Riley did benefit from at Oklahoma, Bill Biedenbaugh as offensive line coach. And Bill Biedenbaugh is a gold standard Cadillac, top of the line offensive line coach. So Biedenbaugh and Jerry Schmidt helped Riley do the very successful things he did at Oklahoma. Neither of those guys have been in the picture at all at USC. And so back to the defensive coordinator search. Defensive coordinator candidates that they are going to ask about Benny Wiley. And if Lincoln Riley's smart, if he's thinking a few moves ahead, and if he's willing to admit, hey, my philosophy was wrong. My philosophy has not worked. My philosophy is not delivering maximum results. My approach is not generating the very best outcomes, which is what USC and its fans aspire to. If Lincoln Riley can't admit that he's wrong and he keeps Benny Wiley on as strength coach, well, first, he's probably going to chase away the very best defensive coordinator candidates. And second, he's not going to have a very tough team in 2024. When you go into the Big Ten, you need to go into those cold Midwestern days in late October and November. You need to slug it out in the trenches, and USC is just going to get thrown around like a dirty old rag. So Lincoln Riley has to admit that he's wrong. And that's the thing with Lincoln Riley. He wants to be the smartest guy in the room. He enjoys being the smartest guy in the room. He wants to be the smartest guy in the room. That's partly why he had a mediocre defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch. He didn't want someone to outshine him. I said this on a USC podcast that I did. I recorded it just a few hours before coming on the air here at the Voice of College Football. When we compare Lincoln Riley and Pete Carroll, Lincoln Riley would prefer to win a game 52-35. Pete Carroll would prefer to win a game 27-10. But the difference, Lincoln Riley insists, he really seems to insist on winning with offense. Like if Lincoln Riley wins a wild shootout, like he's happy. But if Lincoln Riley wins an ugly game in the mud, he is dissatisfied. He was really angry after the Notre Dame game in a way that he wasn't nearly as angry after the Utah game. There's an insistence I see and sense in Lincoln Riley that he wants to win with offense all the time. Pete Carroll preferred to win with defense, but he was fine if the offense took charge on a given day and the defense wasn't great. Lincoln Riley seems to have a more narrow box, a more narrow framework in terms of how he wins. And there is a stubbornness there, and it's a stubbornness attached to wanting to be the smartest guy in the room. And when we look at the very best coaches, not just in college football, but any other sport, the best coaches realize they're not the smartest people in the room, or at least they don't mind being outshined by the people they surround themselves with. Let's look at Dabo Swinney at Clemson, for example. Dabo realized he needed good people around him at Clemson a decade ago. When he was falling on hard times, and then there was that memorable 70-33 loss to Geno Smith in West Virginia in the Orange Bowl. Dabo realized, I need to get better people around me. So he hired Chad Morris as his offensive coordinator, and then the really big hire, Brent Venables, as defensive coordinator. Surrounding himself with really good people enabled Dabo to ascend to the top of college football for several years at Clemson. Is Lincoln Riley ready to surround himself with the very best people? Is he willing to be outshined to any extent at all by his defensive coordinator? That is a legitimate question. And so we're going to find out if just how much Lincoln Riley has in fact matured as a head coach, but beyond that, as a leader, as an overseer of a program. He is only 40 years old. He still has a lot to learn. This is his first really big encounter with failure. Losing in the college football playoff, losing the Cotton Bowl last season, those were failures. But USC still won 11 games last year, and when he made the playoff at Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley still won 12 games. He won the Big 12 championship. This season is his first really big rock bottom level failure as a head coach. So we will begin to learn just what Lincoln Riley is made of as a true leader in the larger framework of college football. So, as you can see, Tim Prangley is on. Thank you, Tim, for joining me. Appreciate it with Mark Rogers needing his rest. So, Tim, ding dong, the wicked Grinch. not dead, but he's out. Your reaction at USC?
Well, again, the only surprise here was the timing, right? A lot of more astute people than I were saying he's gone. I thought it was a really good chance he was gone, but I still thought that they would probably keep him till the end of the year. That was the only wild card. But looking where they are cumulatively in all of the statistical categories, just being at the bottom of everything has become kind of an embarrassment. Giving up over 32 points a game just on the regular has become the average with this team. That's just not the standard. And I think that Lincoln Riley realized that his name was getting drugged through the mud, and they just had to cauterize the wound. And how they did that was, to stop the bleeding, is they just had to kind of make a clean cut and move forward. I'm interested to see what they have for the Ducks, how they're going to stream this thing down. Can they tone it down enough to where these kids are just showing their athleticism and flying out there? We got some playmakers. Now maybe we might be able to see them make plays instead of thinking. They might be shooting those gaps like we saw on that in the overtime. Can you get a young freshman, allow him to be an absolute physical beast like he is, and play with his hair on fire? Let them be football players and not sitting back thinking, how do I fit this gap? What's my assignment? That's going to be the key in this game. Grinch knows, Grinch had to know. I mean, I think everyone knew, right? I mean, at the very, very least, he was definitely gone after they allowed that last drive at Utah. So moving forward, I mean, hopefully now, Grinch, thank you so much for your time here at USC. Now we're moving forward, and now we can start talking about maybe some of the options we might have as defensive coordinator going forward.
Yeah, so I think all eyes are on Jim Leonard, and this is where we get into the point where USC and Riley and Jen Cohen might have their own preferred list, right? Like, here's our number one target, number two, number three, but it's not just about having the number one target. That number one target needs to be willing to listen to a sales pitch, to at least even hear out what USC might have to offer. Jim Leonard could say, no thanks. Like, I appreciate your interest, but no, I want a head coaching job. I want, a bigger job, a bigger platform for me. I want to try my hand at being a head coach. And so then, we go to the plan B, and then we might have to go to plan C, plan D. Of course, Pete Carroll, he was the fourth choice for Mike Garrett in December of 2000. So, what USC wants, what Lincoln Riley wants, that doesn't mean it's going to be the end result, because the candidate has to want the job. The candidate has to, want to interview and listen to a sales pitch. And then after receiving the sales pitch, the candidate has to want to say yes. And so as we delve into the ins and outs of these things, we need to be looking at a lot of different plot points across the country. And at trojanswire.usatoday.com, I released my coaching carousel primer. Not so much making predictions, all right, but just mapping out scenarios, looking at plot points, looking at other jobs, the things that will influence which coaches are going to move where. How many options do coaches have on the table? Is a coach going to want this opening? Is a coach going to want that opening? If there are lots of things for coaches to choose from, it's going to influence how they weigh the USC opening against other openings. So, for example, let's just deal with Jim Leonard first. So if he wants to be a head coach, if Indiana fires Tom Allen, that would be a really interesting plot point. It's very realistic. It's very much in play. Tom Allen would become an interesting candidate for USC. I would rate him very highly, in having someone with working Big Ten knowledge. Leonard might want the Indiana job if Tom Allen gets fired. So that would be bad in terms of getting Jim Leonard, but it would be positive in terms of putting Tom Allen on the open market. So that's just like one of the things where, okay, that might close one door, but it would open another to a high-level candidate. But let's say Indiana retains Tom Allen. Well, then the Tom Allen door remains closed. But then you have hot seats at other programs across the country. And a couple I mentioned, Syracuse, Dino Babers might be at the end of his shelf life up there. He's had a lot of time to improve Syracuse. But with the Orange being in a tailspin, he might get fired. Would Jim Leonhard want the open job at Syracuse? And again, I'm not predicting, but like that would be something for Jim Leonhard to consider, and it would be part of his menu of potential options. And that's where we get into this push and pull with these moving parts in the coaching carousel. Zach Arnett at Mississippi State, he took over for Mike Leach after Mike Leach died. So like the AD really didn't have too much of a choice in terms of what to do for this season. It probably made a certain degree of sense to just say, hey, our coach just died. Our players are grieving. Let's just promote the defensive coordinator from within, a very unique situation. But now Zach Arnett's season at Mississippi State has not gone well as head coach. He's been a little bit in over his head. Adjustments that he's made on offense have not worked out. So one would think that Arnett will not be retained by Mississippi State, and that would put Arnett on the market. And he did a very good job with Mike Leach's defense at Mississippi State. So that would give USC another option. But like a lot of these things aren't official. I mean, I have people saying Tom Allen's going to be fired. I agree. I do think he's going to be fired by Indiana. So we have to see, like, if Jim Leonhard wants the Indiana head coaching job, in the event that Tom Allen gets fired, all right, well, so that takes him off the board for USC, but then you could get Tom Allen as your defensive coordinator, which I think would be a really, really good outcome because, as I've said before, ideally, USC will get someone with a considerable Big Ten knowledge base. If you're going to be going against Big Ten programs, you want a guy with Tom Allen's expertise. He was a really good defensive coordinator at Indiana before he was promoted to head coach. Remember, Kevin Wilson was the Indiana head coach. Tom Allen was defensive coordinator under Kevin Wilson, and Kevin Wilson ran into some sort of scandal that pushed him out, and then Tom Allen steps in. So Tom Allen, as a defensive coordinator, I think would work out really, really well for USC heading into the Big Ten. So you might not get Jim Leonhard at the end of this, but if you wind up with Tom Allen, you're still getting a really, really good defensive coordinator. You're getting the level of upgrade that you need if you're USC. So those are some of the plot points that I raised in my coaching carousel primer at Trojans Wire. So you want to check that out, along with, of course, all our basketball coverage. USC is kicking butt in basketball. Separate topic for a separate time. This is the voice of college football, but I just wanted to get in that plug. If you're a USC fan, you want to love the round ball this year. It's going to reward you. But anyway, with the coaching carousel and this defensive coordinator search, so many ins and outs, so many plot points, so many moving parts. Like we all remember the coaching search for Lincoln Riley. And 48 hours before Lincoln Riley was named USC head coach on Sunday, November 28, 2021, 48 hours earlier on Black Friday, Thanksgiving Friday, the scuttlebutt, the industry gossip was that Matt Campbell was about to become the next head coach at USC, but it didn't materialize. And there were whispers about Lincoln Riley and LSU, and that was a smokescreen for Lincoln Riley to actually not go to LSU, but to go to USC. So follow the plot twists of the carousel. We're back in that mode again, and you definitely want to be looking at these various situations across the country: Syracuse, Indiana, Mississippi State, Baylor, other places where changes could happen, doors could open here, doors could close over there. We're back into that mode of following the coaching carousel.
And I'll be glad. This is, as much as I want to see this play out, as much as I want, here's my big wish, and I don't have to give names or anything. I want a coach that is known, a DC that's known for getting dudes into the NFL, a system and a staff that is known and proven to get guys to the next level. Because if that's the only piece that's missing right now at USC, because we have a pile of talent, defensive talent, that's going other places because of that exact reason. And everyone wants to point to NIL. That's part of it, but it's also the fact that these kids want to get to the NFL. So, I'm huge on the Leonard train. I think he ticks all the boxes as far as the Big 12, the Big 10, and his past coaching success, as well as the ability to get guys into the NFL. So I'm really looking forward to that. I thought we were supposed to have a Duck guy. Is that what time's he coming on?
It was supposed to be right about now, but we can certainly just segue to talk about this Oregon game. And so Tim, so you said what really I think every USC fan is thinking, that hey, maybe with a simplified scheme, just interim guys, just not trying to reinvent the wheel, but trying to get players to be much more relaxed, to be much more unthinking. And when I say unthinking, I mean that in a good way. Play with instinct. Just read and react. Just play football the way you've known it. Don't overthink. And Grinch really did seem to clutter the minds of his players with too much information. And they were confused. They were hesitant. It's not because they weren't given information. It's because they were given too much information. So with Nua and Odom, one would think that, yeah, it's going to be simplified. Just go out there, play football, attack, be aggressive, and let the chips fall where they may. So that seems to be, the obvious approach on defense. And then on offense, Caleb Williams, we all saw him with his outpouring of emotions after the Washington game, and he played such a great game against Washington. He knew the NFL scouts and executives were there. He very firmly established himself as the #1 pick. There was some real debate. There was some drama. Had Drake May surpassed Caleb Williams on the draft board? Caleb Williams put that to bed. Done. And end of discussion with his performance against Washington. What does he have for an encore? And that it's going to be really interesting to see how this USC offense is able to come back after, playing really well against Washington, but not getting the result. And your season's now over in the sense of you're not going to reach your biggest goals. How much fire is that offensive line going to play with? How much fire in the belly are all the USC skill players going to bring to Autzen Stadium for this night game? I'm really interested to see what the response is going to be from USC's offense.
Yeah, and I'm also going to be interested to see just as far as from the Ducks, what are they going to bring offensively? Now, obviously, they're currently right now, I think they're number 3 in the country in yards per play at 7.4 yards per play. So obviously, Bo Nix has got that stuff rolling. Bucky Irving is going to be an absolute nightmare for the Trojans. This is a game, and we've been saying it for I don't know how many weeks, that they have to limit the explosives. They have to get those run fits sorted out. I'm hoping that if by simplifying this thing down, everyone knows what they got to do. They get at it. The undersized defensive line at times might have trouble against a very powerful Oregon offensive line. That's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. But we're going to score. We're going to score. And one thing one person said is, hey, look, we know what our defense is. It's giving up. It's 123rd or something like that in the country as far as points per game, 120. I mean, it's bad. It can't get much worse, right, than we saw against Washington. Let's hope for a shootout. Let's hope that this team, I've seen this offensive line getting better each week. Last couple of weeks, it has been getting better. Our run game looked pretty damn solid last week. I know that Washington's not the best defense. We're comparing 2 different defenses, but I do think we run on this team. I think on the road we limit the number of carries, number of series that we give Bo Nix and that offense, and it's going to be a hell of a shootout. My worry is 2 things. One, the crowd noise. Our offensive line snaps were an issue early on, Matt. That's kind of been fixed a bit, but we haven't had a loud situation like we had it in Notre Dame. This team also showed that when the wheels kind of came off at Notre Dame on the road, it did seem like it kind of snowballed. Let's see if this team, let's see what it has. Let's see if USC, because I'm telling you, SC fans, Washington's going to walk right in and punch USC in the mouth. And if USC cannot take that punch or, and give a punch back, SC goes down by 14. It's going to be lights out. They're going to have to stay this thing just like Washington and hope that you can get some pressure on Bo Nix and keep this thing close. If it gets, this is the kind of game from like we saw in Notre Dame. This is the kind of situation that if we try to play catch up against an offense that as powerful and as good as they have this year, it's going to be good night. With Notre Dame, they don't have an explosive offense. Okay. This team will score in bunches. This team will score quickly. And the way we're giving up explosives, we're not getting back in this game if we go down early. So the key to this game is they're going to punch us in the mouth. SC's got to swing back and keep going and hope to win the turnover. I mean, a game like this, you got to hope you win the turnover battle as well. It comes down to that. Take your line of scrimmage, run the ball well. When they punch you, punch them back in the mouth. How you doing, Ryan?
Hey, great. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear. How you doing?
Beautiful. What's going on, gentlemen? Good to meet you guys.
Good to meet you as well. Wrong one.
So, Oregon, a 16-point favorite. How many points will Oregon cover the spread by?
I started to tell you, I just got off a live stream. I did 2 hours on my own channel here. I just got off there. I jumped in over here. People were saying some crazy numbers. I think it's much more conservative. I have a lot of respect for the Trojan. I think, like you said, I just heard right before I jumped in here saying they're gonna score. Tim, you were saying that. I agree with that. They're gonna score. This Oregon defense is better. That doesn't mean they're the best. This defense was bad last year. You got to run it up against them last year. This team has definitely improved from last year, but it's still, I don't think it's going to stop anybody. And USC is a potent offense. The point is the USC's defense. The USC's defense has just failed them this year over and over and over. And I tend to think that this might be a really good situation getting Grinch out of the way, because I've thought, from my perspective, just from the D linemen and defensive end, the positions that I play, that I know the best, it feels like you guys were doing some exotic stuff you didn't need to do. You would have gone to straight base defense, go forward instead of sideways. I think it would have been a much better situation, had much better angles, but there was some crazy stuff that felt like they were doing with some of those guys. And I feel like that they simplified the defense. You guys might be in a really good position this week. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to handle this Oregon offense, because the Oregon offense is good this year. Don't get me wrong, for sure. Points are going to be on the board this week, for sure. But I tend to think that this defensive shakeup could be a real wrinkle in this game.
Well, I'm going to attack it the same way I attacked it the other week we had someone on. I'd love to hear your insight on this. If USC is going to be successful, like in bunches against your defense, where do they got to attack? What's the actual weakness that USC needs to attack on your defense?
Well, it has been actually running the ball. I think that running the ball is establishing a game. You can't get one-dimensional. I think that's the key thing in anything in college football. And I love the air raid as a fan. I love any of those kind of things, but you have to be able to run the ball. Look what USC had to deal with last week with Washington. Nobody expected Washington to run the ball like that. And when Washington can run the ball like that and throw the ball like that, now they're really dynamic. I mean, they weren't running the ball like that against Oregon, but I tend to think that Oregon, you can run the ball against a little bit, and then you can start to establish that throwing game. You already know the passing game is going to be legit in this game. So I think if USC can control the running game, stay on schedule, stay in manageable third downs and all that sort of stuff, they could be really dangerous. They could score damn near every possession.
Okay, and then flip that around. So we're hoping for a simplified USC attack, nothing too exotic, as you said. Where would you attack? So if you are Sean Nua, right, Brian Odom, where would you attack? Where do you think's the weakest for the Ducks
offensively? So if you're the to me, the whole change defensively for USC has to be in keeping the front established. It felt like they lost the front in a lot of different games, and they took strange angles up front. There were certain plays that looked great, and then other plays that looked completely backwards. And so to me, if they just manage their lines and manage their lanes and they just stay in their gap integrity, I think they should be okay. Oregon is going to run the ball. Oregon runs the ball to set up their pass, as opposed to, I think, USC that passes the ball to set up a run every once in a while. As opposed to, I think in this game, I think USC should pound the rock. I think USC should try to run the ball, establish the run, because I think that's what Oregon's going to do. And I think that was kind of a unique thing when I rewatched that Washington USC game from last week. I thought that was kind of a little bit of a chess and checkers move when Washington said, we're going to run the ball way more in this game. We're going to make that a point of this attack, and we're going to make them stop that. I tend to think that if you're Oregon, you're going to try to run that ball. If you're the USC defense and you simplify things and you say, hey, let's just stop the run because we're going to make them pass their way out of it. Oregon can still do that. Oregon has weapons on the passing game as well. Don't get me wrong. But I think Oregon, if you were to try to stop Oregon, you want to get them in a game where they're running the ball and they're trying to go to their tight ends and trying to dink and dunk their way out of it. No big plays. Like I just heard you say before we came on, no explosives. So if you're a good defense, you're going to try to limit the explosives. You're going to try to keep everything in front of you and not play prevent defense in that manner, but try to keep the running game in front of you. And if you can manage that, Oregon can break it on you, though. Oregon can do a thing where, I mean, you can go 2 or 3 plays, even back them up a little bit, and then they can break one on you. So they're only 1 play away, and as is USC. So I think this is going to be a phenomenal game. I've always thought this was the game of the year, and I know that with the Trojans' last couple weeks or whatever, it's kind of diminished a little bit in value, it feels like. I still think it's the game of the year.
Let's talk tactics. Do you think that Oregon should purposefully try to run away from Bear Alexander, or is Oregon so good up front that, you know what, let's go to USC at its strongest point, and if we can break them down there, then we own this game up front with the entirety of our offensive line against USC's defensive front?
That's a great point. I'm a big fan of Bear. I think, again, when I look at the defensive line, a position that I'm very passionate about, defensive line, defensive end, I looked at when he made that move over, I thought this could be a game changer. If they use him and utilize him correctly, this could be a game changer, because last year it felt like the secondary couldn't really eat. The linebackers, the safeties couldn't really come up and eat. This year, you know, I tend to think that you want to go, if you're Oregon offensive line, you're going to double team him and you're going to run right at him. And then there's other times where you are going to run away from him. But you know, if you go back to the Chip Kelly era, you know, Chip Kelly played against Nick Fairley, who was, again, a dominant defensive tackle at Auburn during his time national championship. And there was very famous part where they went for the 4th down, 4th and goal, and they ran away from Nick Fairley, and they didn't even block him intentionally. They were trying to run away from him, and he was too fast. He came around, got the tackle. I tend to think I'm haunted by that. So to me, I think you need to put bodies on a guy like Bear, and I would come at him with multiple guys at different angles to try to neutralize him and then run right off those guys.
Well, a lot of USC fans are going to know a name I'm about to give right now. You guys have true sophomore Josh Connerly started for you guys at left tackle, broke USC's heart. How is his development coming, and how is that left side of your offensive line?
Excuse me. Josh is a great guy. Josh is, I've become friends with his dad over the years now. Absolute stud, great family. He's really quieted down. You know, the game that really impressed me was the Utah game. It was very quiet on the edge on that Utah, and Utah is known as Sack Lake City, right? They get after it. And I was very impressed at how he neutralized the edge there. You know, he's a quiet guy. He's a pretty calm demeanor guy. Both, you know, him and Mateo Uungle on the other side, very calm demeanor guys. Make a big play, don't have a big celebration or boisterous sort of reaction to it, just on to the next play. And just very calculated. His feet are the key thing. As an offensive tackle, I also played offensive tackle. As an offensive tackle, his feet are the key thing. He can stay with the guy. You know, I oftentimes, when I've coached as well, whenever I talk and coach these offensive tackles, I always talk about these slide drills we used to do in basketball, right? And be able to kind of slide with a guy and be able to stay 2 steps for every one of his steps. He's going to take some big, long steps. If you can match his 2-step and be able to get around him, you can move wherever you need to go to be able to match him. And I think Connerly, he's just so good with his feet. And we saw that as well with Penei Sewell. I mean, I'm not trying to compare him to Penei because I think Penei is definitely at a different level, but Penei Sewell had such great feet. He could be heavy-handed. He was super strong. He was a big dude, but his feet moved so well that he was always in such good position. So he doesn't have big sack numbers, if any. He doesn't have many hurried numbers, if any. And he's really good also in transition where they pull. And when he's in the open field, good luck with him because he's so quick and so good with his feet. So I really like the way that they move on the offensive line. They do a lot of pin and pull stuff. They pull their guards. They pull their tackles with their guards. They do some creative stuff where they down block with their guard and they pull their tackle and their tight end with them. And they create that wall that way and they kick block and whatever. But I'm really impressed with this offensive line. It was a question mark going into this year. about how well this offensive line would do comparatively to last year, because last year was a veteran group. They rebounded, they retooled the whole thing, and I think Jackson Powers Johnson in the middle does a great job setting everybody up. But yeah, Connerly's been an absolute stud, and I think we're only going to get one more year with him, because I think he'll be a natural 3-year and out to the NFL guy.
Another name that USC fans might be familiar with, we know Troy Franklin. Everyone knows his name, stud receiver for you guys. But also there's GB1, Gary Bryant Jr. How much of impact and how often do you think we'll see him on the field on Saturday?
I think Gary's made a really big impact this year. You know, he hasn't been probably the number 1 or number 2 receiver, but at times he's been a very dynamic guy. He's been in the return game as well. But yeah, I mean, again, I come from the perspective of I've got a lot of respect for USC and the Trojans, right? So I have the same amount of respect for USC as I have for Alabama. We got Trayshawn Holden came in from Alabama. We got Gary Bryant came in from USC. And I'm thinking, I said immediately on my show, I said, hey, the transfer portal is different now with Oregon, where instead of getting guys from Boise State, you're getting guys from Alabama or something. Instead of getting guys from a lower division, you're getting guys in conference from a powerhouse, right, at USC. So Gary Bryant, unique player. Fits the Oregon mold, I think, a little bit. Obviously, there's a wealth of talent in your wide receiver room, just as much as it is for our wide receiver room. There was a guy, Chris Hudson, that people really expected to have a big year this year. Have not heard from him at all. I think because of the impact of Gary Bryant Jr. But the big name that people were maybe unexpected is Tez Johnson. Tez came in this year and has just been explosive. He caught a little slant pass in the a 5-yard pass, turned it into a 50-yard gain touchdown in the spring game. And we were like, whoa, that's some speed. Just kind of that electric speed. I mean, nobody has the DeAnthony level, right? DeAnthony Thomas is to us one of our, everybody likes to throw around the GOAT term. I know you guys are close with DeAnthony as well, but DeAnthony to us was one of those guys that was very special, kind of in that same different mold, right? Where we were kind of looking at a situation where you guys knew exactly what you wanted. You were like, hey, man, we got a spot for you, defensive back. For us, we were like, hey, we'll do anything to have you on the team, whatever you want. You can be the quarterback if you want or whatever. I mean, they let him do whatever he wanted, which was great. But nobody really has that sort of electric speed, it feels like. But, man, Tez Johnson really does explode. Gary Bryant Jr., though, is very, very good hands. Good, anybody who with good hands is a guy who's going to be a returner, right? So as soon as you put a guy in the punt return, he's got good hands. And he's a veteran guy. He knows routes. Bo Nix is a guy who's kind of a I don't know if you want to say a boring quarterback, but he's not. He doesn't really have the big explosive. He's not looking for the home run all the time. He's very calculated, and he'll take the underneath stuff all the time. And Gary Bryant Jr. has been the underneath target quite often this year. So he's actually probably eaten more than maybe Troy Franklin in some games just because he's getting more reps. But Troy Franklin has been the guy the whole time at Oregon. His freshman year when he came in, he got hurt right before the year, which slowed his progress a little bit his freshman year. But ever since he's been the guy on the team, he's been the number 1 receiver. And he's a very explosive guy. He's so quick off the ball, and he's very sure-handed for the most part. I like Oregon's chances in this game. I know we're talking about a lot of different skill players and whatnot, but it feels like there's an embarrassment of riches on both these teams right now. I can't wait to be at this game. I love this matchup. Oregon and USC has always been one of the elite matchups, and it's going to be amazing to go forward that it still remains.
So if you swap out that number 6, I know DeAnthony Thomas, we got a guy, Zachariah Branch, that reminds me a lot, actually, of electricity, speed. He kind of has that DeAnthony acceleration where it looks like, DeAnthony used to run, and it looked like everyone was jogging around him.
Totally.
Zachariah Branch is that same kind of guy. So you swap out that 6 for number 1, and you guys, Oregon fans, get ready for some of that because it's going to be they're bringing him in slowly. He's had some injuries. I think the reason why they let it slip out, I heard a couple comments of why he's not returning those kicks is he took a couple shots.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why he missed a little bit of playing time the last couple of weeks. So he's not really but hey, listen, if he's not going to, why not put Raleigh Brown back there? Or why not have another guy that's going to take the ball out? But
my question about Branches though is that how can you get him more involved in the game? It feels like he's not as involved as you would assume he could be, or maybe he should be.
I think early on is because he's a true freshman. I guess they didn't have a lot for him. I think they were going to bring him along. I think he took that. I think he'd been playing injured or got hurt or something, and he missed 2 or 3 games in there. Right. But last week they did get him involved more, and I'm hoping that on end arounds, just I think that you will see a lot more from him. That trick play on the fake end around.
Right.
I think maybe now that's on film. I doubt, obviously, you'd be looking for the throwback to Caleb again, but it's something to play off of, and they may set something up with him on an end around. It'll be interesting to see this week.
Yeah, he's got electric speed, though. Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for you guys' return game, and I think this is going to be a closer game than people think. I just did, like I said, a 2-hour live stream, people talking crazy scores, and there's some confidence on the Duck side. I get it. I'm with that, but I also am an old school Duck fan with a lot of PTSD, and I see, a lot of history with the Trojans, man. I've seen Matt Barkley do the whole thing in the student section, wave the band around or whatever right in front of me. I've seen those games. So, you don't want to shoot out with this team. I think the Ducks defense needs to step on it pretty quickly. I think the Ducks defense is going to be the key to the game.
Okay, last question for me, because I know that you need to rest your vocal cords after all the talking.
Hey, I'm ready. I go for hours. I am. The guys
Okay.
on my channel know. I mean, trust me. Hey, and also, I really appreciate what you guys do. I got a lot of love for Mark Rogers. So Mark Rogers is one of my guys. I really love what he does for college football. So thank you guys as well for what you do for college football, man. I've been doing this for over 12 years now. So yeah, I love the fact of people are doing it. People are loving it. What do you got? How many people you got live right now?
Yeah, about 154 looks like live right now.
That's what I'm talking about. Let's go. It's a big game.
It is a big game.
So my final question is, you really actually began to kind of deal with that kind of territory, and that is the Oregon mindset, because, obviously, Duck fans in the chat, they're thinking 30, 40-point win. I personally think Oregon also blows the doors off USC in this game, but go back to last November, that home game against Washington. Oregon was fully expected to win that game. Didn't happen. And one of the things I see with Dan Lanning and how he's evolved and improved this year, I think he has a firmer hold on this team compared to last year. Just look at the Washington game. That loss, that would send some teams into a tailspin. Oregon's actually gotten better after that game, whereas Washington's been the team that's played worse since that game. So a loss turned into a positive developmental moment for this Oregon team. But last year, Lanning had a harder time getting his guys right in the midst of what they were doing. I think last year's team assumed it was better than it actually was. This team seems to have a lot more humility about what it is, and that let's push forward to the goal. Let's not think we're better. Let's go out and prove it. And I think that Washington game was a real grow up moment for a lot of these Oregon players coming back 1 year later. That's probably going to be a really good safeguard and a reminder not to be overconfident heading into this game. Focus on the preparation, focus on how you play, and let your game and your quality of performance do the talking for the Ducks.
I totally agree with all. I think those are great points. I've been saying this week, this game kind of has a lot of hype built into it. And I think the Ducks are in a position right now where if they just take care of business and not focus on the enemy and the opponent or whatever you want to call it, and just do what they need to do, I think they're in a good position this year. I think last year I hoped for the best, but I went to that Georgia game. So I was at that thing. I mean, the Peaches were good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and there was some good times to be had in Atlanta late night. But the ideology is that, I never really had that much confidence in last year's team. You had a first-year head coach. You had all these new players coming in. The transfer portal was very rich with that team. And it felt like it just wasn't quite exactly what you wanted. This year, it feels very different. And my confidence level is through the roof right now with this team. And I truly believe that they have an opportunity to win these last 3 games. And if they have obviously the ASU game looks like an easier game comparatively to the USC game and the Oregon State game. Oregon State's going to be a problem. No joke. And you guys are stoked you don't have to play them this year, man. The Beavs are going to be a freaking problem. But I think this whole time it's all been about these 4 big games, right? Washington, Utah, USC, the Beavs. And now you've got this USC game, right? You lost the Washington game. It was as close as you could get on the road. It was a great game. One of the craziest games I've ever been to. And I've been to a lot of games in Seattle. That was absolutely the craziest game I've ever been to up there. And then you absolutely blew out Utah. I was up in Salt Lake for that game. Rice Eccles is super loud, and it got real quiet because the Ducks just went wild. I mean, I've never really seen a game like that from the Ducks. So to answer those two games, to now think about what happens with USC, I don't really know what we're going to get. I hope to God we get the Utah version. I hope, but it could very easily come down to the last, fourth quarter. If there's 5 minutes to go and Caleb Williams has the ball, I'm starting to shake right now thinking about it. I'll be there, man. It is going to be a great game. Again, like I said, I've seen USC come in and rip the heart out before. So it could easily happen. And USC still has everything in front of them. They sweep the rest of this next week, and the next week, they're in a good position. They've got the 2 losses in conference. They could look at everybody else with 2 losses in conference. USC could be in a unique position with some head-to-heads. And if you get to the Pac-12 championship, anything can happen. So I think there's a lot to play for. I know there was immediate conversation about, the season's over. And I'm not one of those guys who's a championship or bust type of guy. I believe in every game is important. And I'm here for the student athletes. But, man, I saw a lot of commentary. Oh, Caleb Williams shut it down. I said, what? You got one of the biggest games of the week this year. Why would you do that? Why would you try to shut it down? You go on the road, you get this win, and then you get the UCLA win, which it looks like you could beat UCLA this year. Why could you not? Their offense is not scary at all. And so to have a situation where it's good on good, your offense against their defense, I think your offense looks better, and I think that your defense can handle their offense. So I think it's a win there. So all you need to do is go to Autzen and come out with a win. And if you get able to win the last week, I know.
Just walking out to get a win
right now.
Yeah, I think everyone's saying that Caleb's going to shut it down with the opportunity to go on a stage like Autzen, against, UCLA is, for the players, usually the number one rival. Sure. We haven't been up to Autzen in a while, and this is an opportunity for USC to go into Autzen. Caleb, this is the thing, he thrives. People get on this guy, but the dude is the ultimate competitor. And if anyone thought that he was not going to play in this UCLA game, again, they're out of their mind. He's not going to play in the bowl game, but he will finish the regular season. There's no doubt about that.
That's a unique thing there. So and why is that? Because the UCLA matters more than the bowl game. The bowl game is so far off. You can start the training for the NFL, or what do you think the reason is behind that?
Just the UCLA USC rivalry is like one of the biggest, in football. But the fact also is just the closest, the location. All these kids know each other. There's a lot of smack throughout the year that goes into it. And he has an opportunity now. He's 1-1 against Notre Dame, but he has a chance to go 2-0 against the Bruins. So he's got that Heisman. That'd be a nice little capstone for him, because obviously his team. Let's face it. If we had 22 Caleb Williams, we would be national champions. There's no doubt about it in my mind. The problem is, does his defense let him down? But he has carved out, even more so in my book, the fact that he's not going to win, get a chance to play in a playoff or even play in a really substantial bowl game, most likely. And the fact I know the dude's going to fight. Again, he gets a lot of crap for wearing his emotions on his sleeve. I know there's a lot of macho men out there who have never cried or got upset. But I will tell you this, the guy's not crying because he's sad. He's not crying to mommy because he lost. The dude is just absolutely going at 110 miles an hour and wants to win so damn bad. He wasn't having a tantrum. That was raw emotion. And people that can't see that are just morons.
Or they've never competed, dude. Has anybody watched UFC? These guys are all crying. 90% of them after a huge win, dude. Bro, come on. Or a loss. Come on, bro. I mean, dude, get out of here with that. That's the problem,
Ryan.
Get out of here with that.
Ryan, most of these guys have never played sports.
That's my point. You couldn't catch the ball if you threw it to them. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
More or less come off the edge. Come on. I'm 45. I'm ready to hit somebody.
All right, I guess Ryan, what do you have? So what is your prediction? Okay, so you think it's going to...
I think the Ducks are going to win, but I think it's going to be close, and I think it's going to be high scoring. I would say like a 42-35. And that would be comfortable for me. It could be easily like a 42-41. And I'm like, screaming and yelling in the stands. So I tend to think the Oregon's going to win. The reason why is I think Oregon is very, very balanced. Yeah. They are very efficient. They don't turn the ball over. They stay on schedule. They don't get rattled. They just do what they do. They pass the ball well. They run the ball well. They don't beat themselves. They are penalized. They can get in some penalty weird stuff, but they can find their way out of it. Last week they couldn't get it. They couldn't get the penalty right, and then all of a sudden they struck Cal for like a first and 37 or something, or whatever it was, for a touchdown. So they stay on schedule. They don't turn the ball over. All those things I think are going to help them. There could be some turnovers in this game. They could definitely change. But USC is historically a team that everybody plays their best against. Even the best teams still play their best against USC. That's why I think this is the best game. It'll probably end up being that the Washington game is the best game of the year in the Pac-12 because it looked like just such an absolute throwdown, right? And it was so close the way it went. It should have gone to overtime, really. It should have been an extra game afterward. But this game, USC is always respected by Oregon. And I would say in the sense of everybody wants to beat USC, even the best teams, that shows the respect for USC. So I think that there's a lot to be said that's built in history, but it's also built in the current makeup of this team. This team is electric.
I'm going to be very happy if this is a one-score game late in the fourth quarter, Ryan. Trust me. I'm hoping that. My big concern is what was the game in the Coliseum? Was that 2011? I can't remember. 2012, 2011, where it was just a shootout game, shootout. And then all of a sudden, you guys had a couple of big plays. You guys went up by 10, 14 points. And a lot of SC fans at that point went, it was kind of like the Chick Hearn thing where he says in overtime, the first one to score 2 baskets wins. And these kind of games, it seems like if you're going to have this kind of a shootout in the second half with a team like a Washington or like a Ducks, right? You go down by a couple scores and your defense is not going to get those stops. It's like, good night. And then to Matt's point, and like I said, when I alluded to Notre Dame, that's when the wheels kind of come off the wagon a little bit sometimes. And so although the teams are probably closer on the field than the score will show, sometimes when they start doing too much, playing too hard, trying to make things happen, playing hero ball, not playing sound football, that's when it gets out of hand. And like you just said, I've had, and we do a Pac-12 show every Wednesday. You guys make sure you watch that this Wednesday on Mark Rogers channel. And I've had you guys number one for, I think, 2 weeks now. Maybe I was riding Washington for a while, but I just started seeing how Washington was struggling. Their defense was being exposed. I've been watching your guys' defense all year. I'm going to admit, I was one of those guys making fun of Bo Nix in year one for about maybe 5 games. And then since then, I've kind of shut my mouth. He's been everything and more. It's great. People don't realize that these kids get better. You know what I mean? They assume you go to a different situation, you move in. I think whatever Dillingham did with them, I think he unlocked something in the development, and it's just continued this year. I think Will Stein, it gets a lot of credit. I was question marks behind Will Stein's offense at UTSA, but will it work in the Pac-10? Will it work against some of these defenses in the Pac-12? And it has. And you're a very scary team. I think USC has the players. I think they play hot and loose, like you said. Maybe we have it going, and it's football, you guys. I'm going to watch it, and because we know, stuff happens. It happens every week. Definitely, Oregon is the better team on both sides of the ball. They're playing just great football, and being at Autzen, and it's in a regular year. Playing at Autzen, that's just the last play. That's another Rice Eccles, right? You just don't. It's like playing at Husky Stadium. It's just these are amazing places to play. And if you have snap troubles like we've had this year, and if you've had road troubles on the line like we've had this year, that's the last place you want to go.
Right. Yeah, and this stretch that you're on, you're back to back against Washington and Oregon is a tough thing. I mean, Oregon had that last year where they had this stretch at the end of the year, and this year there's a little bit of balance in their schedule where it feels like you got the Cal game intermixed or the ASU game intermixed between some big games, but to go back to back is very difficult, and to have an emotional letdown like you had last week. Felt like you were in that game, man. Another one where it's like, Oregon and Washington was this close. USC and Washington was like this close. The score may look like it's 10 points, but it was really, really close. That game was an absolute make or break kind of a game until late. But again, this is a game. This is why you love college football, because you get these good matchups. And I just love the fact that Oregon and USC are going to still make this thing happen in the Big Ten. I know there was some rumblings that there was some people upset about it in the USC camp that they didn't want him to go or whatever. But dude, I think this is a great rivalry, and I think you have to keep some sort of connection to the West Coast. And if you look at it big picture, no offense to our fellow brethren and the other parts of the thing, you got the 4 best teams out here if you're the Big Ten. You got the 2 LA schools and you got the Northwest schools that have both represented. Washington's been great for years, and Oregon's been great new. They're the young money team, but hey, we'll take them. And out of those 4, I think we're going to do some damage in this new conference. I think the Big Ten is in trouble, especially in basketball.
Yeah, the Huskies have kind of taken the shine off of my joke about the half off Huskies, right? Because they they beat us. And now if you guys beat us, I got to drop my discount Ducks joke for about a year as well. So I'm hoping that maybe we can keep one of my jokes this year, but it's Ryan, it's not looking too good. Again, just too tough on both sides of the ball.
Well, you got to win on defense, right? Anybody who's played the game, put it strapped on a helmet, man, knows you got to win on defense. And if your defense lets you up, it's demoralizing. Your offense can't score enough. Your defense is just putting them in terrible positions. And it's a game of field position, and your defense can really hurt you on that one. So I tend to think that USC is a great offense. Their defense has really hurt them this year. And it's a damn shame because it feels like it's not really the players. I look at it as a scheme thing. I look at it through the lens of maybe it's the coaching issue. I know it's easy to blame the defensive coordinator and be like, oh, that's the defense's fault, but you still got to tackle guys. You still got to have good, angles. You still got to have good gap, and you still got to have a good integrity of a defense. You can't let some big plays happen right in front of you. But Oregon's let them happen. I mean, hell, or at the end of that Washington game, right? The big play right over the middle. Oregon's like, where's the ball at? As it's coming right over here. Big play, big play. So, that's what college football is all about. That's why it's our favorite, man.
So I know you're probably looking from a distance. I'm sure you haven't put too much thought on this, but who's the last DC you want to see USC get their hands on going forward? I know we don't play you next year, but I'm sure you'll be on the schedule the following year. Yeah, who would be like your nightmare scenario of the guy you definitely do not that is possible, obviously, right? Well, who would be the guy you least want to see at USC at the defensive coordinator?
Yeah, here's the thing. I think we got a new brand of football a little bit. You got to prepare for the Big Ten. I mean, outside of Ohio State and Michigan and maybe Penn State, you got some really interesting teams out there. So I think you're going to have a traditional defensive coordinator that's locked in, maybe a guy from the pros, maybe a guy who's really been around a lot of run games because a lot of those teams have a major run game. But yeah, I don't know the names necessarily. I just think that USC is always going to be a great place to go. I mean, am I wrong that Alex Grinch would have been the next head coach somewhere had he not just stayed and been a head coach? Now he got fired as defense coordinator. I don't know exactly his career trajectory, but it felt like he was like on the path to become a head coach before he took the defensive coordinator for USC. Am I wrong on that?
I know he was much maligned at Alex Grinch.
Yes,
he improved a little bit there, but he was not making it happen at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I wasn't following it close enough, but I just felt like he was one of those guys who was like one of those young up and coming coordinator.
At one time he was. He was the hot name when he was coming out of Wazoo. Everyone, he's going to the Buckeyes. They're like, oh wow, it's be huge.
Yeah. They had the speed D and all that other sort of stuff that's going on. Yeah, I felt like his trajectory was going up. I don't know why it's now just soured so much. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have talent.
He hasn't had it come together. I mean, again, I think I've said this for a while. He sold, obviously he was with Leach, but then he sold Urban Meyer on it, and then he sold Lincoln Riley on it. These are 3 guys that know football and they know X's and O's. My guess is they're in a bar somewhere and he's drawing up stuff, plays on napkins, or going, hey, that looks really good. But as we know, things look great in a laboratory, and then you get out in the real life of the whole thing, and then everything falls apart. I don't, it's college kids. They don't have unlimited time to practice. The scheme does. The issue, it seems, this year with USC is guys are just unable to line up. Guys don't know their gap, their run fits look all crazy. Yeah. Guys are in wrong gaps.
I totally agree.
It's kind of a mess. But you can tell that if they're where they're supposed to be, it would have been a great play. It's just something from the chalkboard to the playing field, between the hashes, something's getting wiped out.
Yeah, that's what I saw. I mean, when I watched the film, I said, why are these guys doing this? Why are they there? And then why is their first step left instead of right, instead of forward? There were some weird things I saw there. And I don't know if they clean all that up in a week, but if they clean up half of it, they're a better defense than they were last week.
And schematically, I think it would probably work great if you had an NFL roster, meaning you have defensive ends that can run with running backs,
yes,
and you have lockdown corners that can lock down, you have bookend corners that can lock, because they're put on islands a lot. That's USC is one of the worst teams in explosives. It's not because we don't have good players. It's just you put any corner one-on-one with cover zero. I mean, it's like there's no one behind you.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's too bad. And I feel bad for those guys because, again, I think that there's talented guys at USC, and they're carrying on a brand, and 3 losses to them is an absolute a gut punch. So, they can't afford any other losses in my mind. If they lose, I mean, we just talked about them possibly winning the last 2 games. What if they lost the last 2 games? I mean, holy moly. I mean, that could be just absolute travesty if you're a freaking 7-5 team at the end of the year with this team going into this season. That would be unreal.
I honestly think that, numbers and fans might get really upset, but all the recruits are looking at who USC hires at DC. Going forward, a year from now, no one's going to care that USC was either 9-3 or 7-5 at the end of the season. They're really not going to care. What's going to matter is who and how quickly they get that job filled going into Big Ten, because next year we got Notre Dame at home, but we still got Notre Dame, and we got LSU at a neutral site. And you guys have all seen our schedule. It's just, we don't know what Washington will be next year, but we got Penn State and Michigan on the schedule. It's going to be a brutal schedule.
Now, what about your guys' deal with the Big Ten? You still get to keep Notre Dame, right? And then your protected rivals UCLA.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the rivalry game will be the end of the year, the UCLA game, and then the Notre Dame game will be wherever Notre Dame can fit it into your schedule, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping we don't ever have it at the end of the year. I mean, they say it's tradition, but this game's been moved once. So let's move it a second time. This game needs to go to the beginning of the season, period.
That'd
in
be
my book. Just does.
I've seen that.
Look at Matt. Matt's a traditionalist. He's thinking about all those end of the year Heisman Trophy battles for national championship at the end of the year. But I'm just saying, just now with the travel and league travel and all that stuff, it's just one more trip out to the Big Ten. I definitely want to move it to where it's going to be a game that's going to be between USC and Notre Dame before we get into that Big Ten schedule moving around.
I like that idea. I mean, you guys always have such a tough schedule anyway in the non-conference. So, I mean, it makes sense that you guys would do that and have that early on. I think you guys are going to do some serious damage in the Big Ten. I think basketball-wise and football-wise, I think all these 4 Pac-12 members are going to do really well in the Big Ten next year. But I really like USC's chances, man. I think USC is going to rattle some cages pretty quickly. I don't think Iowa or Indiana or Illinois wants anything to do with these Pac-12 schools.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll see. They definitely don't want. Hey, listen, they definitely don't want any part of Washington, Oregon, and USC's offenses. That I can tell you. No. That I can tell you. If they and if Chip Kelly gets more rolling, they're not going to want any part of that either. So, it's going to be interesting.
For sure.
But we lost Matt. Ryan, again, thanks again so much for being here.
Man.
Absolutely awesome. I think I'm hoping for a great game. I do hope your prognostication of it being close in the fourth quarter comes to fashion, because I'll tell you what, I am not looking forward to a situation where this team starts having issues on the line and it starts it could go south fast. I'm with you though. I think that USC has enough scoring power on offense to stay in this game. It's going to be, can these kids, rise up, play fast, maybe overcome that they might lose. And I'm worried also about halftime adjustments, but hey, we'll go there, right? We'll figure out, let it roll. Let's see how tough. And I believe, any game Caleb's in, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think it's going to be a close one. I still, though, this was the one game that I thought we could steal from you guys earlier in the season, when I thought we'd have a solid offensive line, and I thought a greatly improved defense. Well, we know the defensive side is gone. We've seen some improvement on offensive line, but you guys' pass rush, it might be an issue for USC on the right side. We still haven't figured that out. So if we can hold up the right side of the line and give Caleb some time, I think we guys give you a run for your money. If we cannot get that snap off, if we start getting, just dead ball fouls and start snowballing, and you have free runners coming from the right side like we've had against Notre Dame, I think it might get ugly. But Ryan, really appreciate you being here and your time. Great show. You guys make sure you go check out Ryan.
Yep.
Ryan, you want to plug your shows? When do you have your shows?
Yeah, Sports Chef 503, man. I do the live stream Tuesday nights throughout the year. I do on Sundays. I do a recap of all those different videos. Really quickly, though, my bros who are USC, who were going to come up to the game, who I was all pumped about, we were partying or whatever. I said, yo, you still coming to Eugene? He says, no. He says, hard to spend money to go see this team that can't stop anyone.
And then we're talking about
a USC grad a couple years ago. So I'm just saying.
Well, Ryan, we had trouble stopping Utah's offense.
Dude, Cal.
So I think that's probably what your bro's talking about.
Cal was just ripping off scores. So I know, but I think this is a big game. I think this matters to a lot of SoCal kids. This is a game for Oregon SoCal kids and for the USC. For whatever reason, the Oregon USC game always tends to be a great matchup, and it is a showcaser. So hopefully everybody watches from the East Coast, and I really appreciate you, Tim, for having me on. And a shout out to Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, man.
Yeah, fight on, Ryan. And you guys, it's gonna be a great game on Saturday. Make sure, Trojans, that you're ready. Those of you guys are traveling, my heart goes out to you. Austin's not a very fun place to go visit, so enjoy it while you can. The rest of you guys, so we had the show usually on Monday nights, so we will be returning to Monday nights next Monday. Also tomorrow, make sure you check out the Pac-12 show. And then immediately after the Oregon game, I'm sure a lot of you guys will have a lot to say. Join us on the USC Voice of College Football post-game show right after the game. So for Ryan and Matt had to go. Thank you all. Awesome that you could make it. Appreciate all you guys. And make sure you catch the show again next Monday, 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 Eastern. Fight on, and thank you, Ryan, again.
I should do this instead of the peace symbol because